Howdy, welcome back to the Big Blue Workshop. It is 32 degrees here in Dallas, Texas today. I'm cold, so I'm not really doing any projects in the shop other than we're doing Pinewood Derbies this year. It's January right now, so the Cub Scouts and the Indian guides are in and out of my shop on the weekends. Fortunately, the weather hadn't been too bad, but I thought I would show you some documentation on a router table I built. About 4 years ago when I moved into this house, I built this shop, moved out of a smaller shop at my old house. I had a smaller router table. It didn't have any storage in it really. It had a smaller work surface. So I built one with a bigger work surface, a nicer fence, more storage. It's got some cool features for dust collection and things that I did not have in my old router table. So I back then was not really making videos of this stuff, but I did document it in photos, so I'll walk you through that. I'll show you some pictures of the old one and how we built the new one, and see what you think. If you like it, subscribe or like the video, and let me know some comments on what you thought below. Stay tuned and pay attention. You might pick up some cool ideas. Thanks again.
This is my old router table. It was a smaller top. It worked really well, but it just didn't have the space and the features I needed. So I decided I needed a bigger table. I saw a video on a really cool one, so this is what I built. Since my old shop didn't have a lot of space, I ended up having to mill all the lumber out in the backyard using a table saw and a miter saw. I used 3/4 inch pine lumber. I created a tremendous amount of dust doing all this milling. My son just thought it was loads of fun, and so did the dog. Mom was thrilled when they came in the house and got it everywhere. I used 3/4 inch plywood to do the main framing of the unit and the drawer slides, and then I used pine lumber for the decorative parts, the exterior panels. You can see the rabbit that I ran around the inside of this panel, and then I used hardboard that I had pre-painted and glued it into that rabbit and clamped it all up and glued up each one of those exterior panels prior to construction. You can kind of see an up-close view of how that actually sank into that rabbit. I used the same process for the drawer fronts as well. So you can see the finished product of the panel here, and the drawer fronts look very similar. They were just different sizes. This is the actual left side module that would hold 3 drawers in it, and then this is the center part of the bottom of the router table that would just kind of hold the left and the right side together as I started construction. One thing I don't have a picture of is once I got these 3 pieces together, I put a 1/4 inch piece of hardboard on the back of it to shore it up side to side. All you dovetail people are going to lose your minds when you see how I built these drawers. I basically built them out of 3/4 inch plywood, joined them end to end, and then ran a rabbet around the inside of it. I glued a panel to the bottom of the drawer and just tacked it with some brad nails. So you can see the rabbet that I used there, and I didn't even chisel out the corners. I just rounded off the panels. So some of you guys are just losing your minds over that right now, I'm sure. Once I got the bottoms all cut to fit, I glued them all up, laid bricks on top of them, let them dry out, and they made pretty nice drawers. Someday soon I'll do a build video on my high-dollar assembly tables that I use that consist of OSB and sawhorses. I ended up making 5 drawers since the 6th bay in the top right corner ended up needing to be a bay to house all the electronics for the switch. The top left drawer is where I store all my loose router bits, and then I've got some of my kits in the other drawers. Before actually putting the back on the unit, I drilled a hole in the inside panel for my electricity. This is just a quick shot of one of the drawer fronts. You can see I did it the exact same way as I did the side panels on the unit. I bought a pre-laminated piece from a home center for the fence and for the top. I used 3/4 inch plywood as the frame and then mounted the laminated piece to the plywood. I actually put sliding front on it so I can separate it for dust collection when needed, and then I can close it back up if I'm just routing a long piece. You can actually space this as well with shims to do any kind of joining work, since I don't use a joiner that much. I use stop blocks on occasion, so I went ahead and put the T-track in the unit, and then I countersank the front piece so that I could just put a carriage bolt through it with some wing nuts on the back to slide it back and forth. I enclosed the center section of the fence, drilled a simple hole that fits a standard vacuum hose, and it works great. I made very simple L-clamps out of plywood for the fence. They're 3 pieces laminated together and cut to fit. Drilled a giant hole through the middle. Oh, wait, that's sideways. There it is. And put some knobs on it, and they work like a champ. For the electrical portion, I just housed a receptacle in the top right bay of the router table, mounted it to a heavy-duty switch in the front of the router table. I drilled a smaller hole next to the larger hole where the plug runs through, and that just keeps the wire from getting pulled out when I move the table around. Although it's completely unnecessary, I added a plexiglass panel to the main door of the router table so you can see the router through the front of the unit, along with a light that lights it up. I went ahead and cut a piece of 3/4 inch plywood for the top, and then mounted the laminated particle board to the top of that, and that gave me some extra rigidity for the top of the table. I measured and cut the hole for my mounting plate and then ran the rabbet around the outside of it. I then glued the top to the plywood and then trimmed it with a trim router and a flush trim bit. I left the corners on the plywood just in case I ever decided to go with a different brand of mounting plate. And here's the vanity light. I actually ran this to a separate switch on the side of the unit so it doesn't come on every time I run the router, but it does look really cool when I'm showing off my shop. I mounted a pretty big router underneath this plate with a plunge base on it. That makes it a little easier to change bits and to adjust the height when you're working. If I ever went with a standard router, I'd probably put a lift on the table, but right now I don't really need it. Once I got the tabletop trimmed up, my intent was to go back and trim it out with some nice hardwood. It only took me about 2 years to get around to that part of the project. I did mount some heavy-duty casters to the bottom of it. It sits the same height as every other tool in my shop, and it's very functional for what I do. Once again, here's the finished product.
So thanks for watching the video. I want to give a quick kind of shout out to Steve Ramsey from Woodworking for Mere Mortals. If you have not looked at his channel, I got a lot of my ideas from him. He has, I believe it's a few parts on a video on how he built a router table in his shop. I think he's done another one since then. He's got a basics series that he's doing. This one is one of his earlier videos. This video is a lot older, from one of his first builds that he did in his shop. And I got a lot of my ideas from that. So if you haven't seen that video, there's some great ideas there as well. Again, thanks for watching, and come on back and view more videos. Again, have a great day. We'll see you soon.